The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Well, it's New York City's first and only grassroots and multi-platform centered on re-entry and formerly incarcerated persons. Stay with us to hear more about some new initiatives and partnerships as they plan for 2018 and how they're fulfilling their goal on creating safe, healthy, and inclusive communities for those who've been incarcerated. That's coming up on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for joining us every week as we're here on BronxNet's Channel 67. We also invite you to share with us via our social networking sites. You can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can find out all about the latest and also share your perspective. If there's something that you want to see, of course, there's a possibility that you can if you let us know. So that's why we say stay connected to us. And of course, you'll find out all the latest goings on. Well, it is New York City's first multi-platform that is collectively centered on reentry, with the mission of creating safe, healthy, and inclusive communities for those who've been incarcerated or impacted in some way by incarceration. My guests in the studio are joining me now to tell us more about this wonderful organization and the work they're doing in the community. The founder for Race for Reentry, Ms. Jennifer Lackard, and she's joined by Mr. Wesley Caines, the reentry coordinator for the Bronx Defender Services. And thank you both for sharing with us.
Thank you for having
Welcome
us.
back, and good to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When we talk about reentry, I'll start ladies first. As we talk about reentry, obviously a major push in the social justice movement, a major push across communities across New York City and America, because incarceration comes with a secondary layer of baggage, if you will, which is the struggle to really reconnect with society. So share with us a little bit about the initiative right now and what's being done to really help people in the area of reentry.
So the 5K Walk, Run, Bike is intended to be a community collective of different organizations kind of at the table, and they're all opting in to whatever their strengths and weaknesses are in that area. And so where there's a weakness from another organization, we try to fill that gap by partnering up with someone else so that there's no wrong door for people when they come home from prison, because as you say, it is a barrier to reentry.
And talk about engagement, because I know recently you've been involved in doing some engagement as well.
Yes, I mean, the work we do is highly necessary. I think people who have been justice involved are people who are eager to re-enter and feel as if they're a part of a community. And I could think of no greater way for people who have been formerly incarcerated or justice involved to be involved in their community than civically. Unfortunately, our school systems don't always have civics courses available. So people really don't know where to turn, how to address issues of barriers. You were speaking about, you know, the collateral consequences, or what we like to term at the Bronx Defenders, perpetual punishment of justice involvement, and how to overcome and address those punishments, right? Maybe homes, losing children. So that's basically the foundation of our work. And being civically engaged in the community and helping to educate the community is really about informing people how it is they can be good self-advocates productively, without feeling the frustration of recognizing issues and problems in the community without knowing where to turn. Yeah.
So for people who don't know about Race for Re-Entry, why don't you give us a little information? It's coming up.
So we had the event last year, and this year is going to be, again, our second year we're debuting, again, in Soundview Park. The race starts at Soundview Park, goes through Pugsley Creek, and ends in the Castle Hill section of the Bronx. It's surrounded by a week of activities, so we have community hoops basketball that's happening on Saturday, April 14th at the Sotomayor Center, which is great because that's included with law enforcement and community. We actually added two new divisions this year. We have a youth game. We actually also have a women's game, and actually a third one. We have a wheelchair basketball game. So there'll be 4 divisions of the community hoops, which is where they're playing with law enforcement. It's truly about collaboration and community. And then we'll have the 5K walk, run, bike. Actually, it's walk, run, ride because we're adding wheelchairs this year.
Awesome.
So there'll be a division, and it's actually the first disability race that we've had in the Bronx. So that's super exciting. And it also sheds lights on the fact that there's a lot of people that are returning, impacted by incarceration, returning home from community that are disabled. And so those needs also need to be met, which is another barrier to reentry.
Wesley, give me a little bit about the Bronx Defenders and the work that you guys are doing. Obviously, when you talk about re-entry and people who are incarcerated, as I said at the top of the show, there's a lot of barriers that seem to stem when a person leaves prison. For somebody who may not be watching, or somebody's watching right now and says, listen, I don't know about this, I'm really not too familiar with this. What are some of the barriers that people have when they're trying to re-enter back into society?
Well, first, let me say thank you for having us. At the Bronx Defenders, I think most people are familiar with the work that we do on the front end with the community, which is criminal defense, housing defense, immigration practice, family court defense. But they may not be as familiar with the work that we do on the back end or sometimes in that middle passage of justice involvement. We have pre-entry orientation that we tailor to people who have to go into prison to prepare them for their eventual release from prison. We work with their families. We look to address, in the civil action practice where I sit, we look to address those perpetual punishments. We look to make sure that people's employment rights, one of the barriers, are protected, and that your justice involvement doesn't negate you from staying in your home or keeping your children, right, in your home. These are all barriers that people face that I think, everyday citizens really understand and maybe even expect that if you have committed an offense, that there will be some punishment. But I think that most folks will be very surprised to realize that nationally, the American Bar Association counts 47,000 local laws and ordinances which prevents you from being civically whole again. So that's the work that we do on the back end, attacking those barriers and making sure that our front end work is connected to our policy work and letting policymakers understand the impacts of laws on the people in the communities firsthand. And the civic engagement piece is really tied right into that, in that we don't want to always be out front. We want to educate people so that they can be self-advocates as well.
Now, Jen, I was with the governor yesterday, and he talked a little bit about prison reform, talked about Rikers Island, talked about bail reform, the things that are really challenging a lot of people. When you hear talk about bail reform and you talk about that, obviously that's also tied to reentry as well. Are you optimistic with what you're hearing coming out of the state in terms of dealing with some of these issues?
I think the plan is, and interesting is, I think bail reform is Wesley's, that's his apple, that's what he deals with every day. I think on the ground, kind of the community that I deal with and just interacting with folks, there's a lot of pessimism because people have just, they cycle through the system, and they're yesterday we had a civic education session at Bronx Community College, and a person asked a very relevant question: why do it when nothing's going to change? And that's a real question to ask. And unfortunately, you can't, what I said to him was that many of the things that you're doing now sets the stage for the future. And what you're dealing with is what people may or may not have done in the past. Because it takes time for that to sit in, for you to rally the right people around a cause, to get the people at the table, to have the governor, the mayor, all at the table talking about these issues. Rikers is something that's closing because it's a larger conversation. There is a closed Rikers campaign. There's a collaborative of 50, 60 organizations that are sitting around the table talking about how can we close Rikers in a safe way. And so it is not just something that one person can do. Similarly to the race, what we've done with the race for reentry, there were 50, 60 different organizations that were represented there because they all have a stake in this, whether it's on the front end, in the middle, or even on the back end. And a lot of the stuff that Wes is talking about in terms of really trying to prevent the perpetual punishment is that whatever they're not able to do, or other organizations that are like him are not able to do, on the back end, we're the ones trying to mitigate that damage and try to get them back into employment and trying to make concessions or connections to it. So.
All right, well, stay with us. Going to take a quick break and come back talking more with Jay and Wesley in a minute. We'll be back with more talking about reentry right here on Perspectives in this view.
Coming to you from our BronxNet studios, 4 new shows highlighting some of the best of the Bronx has to offer. We sit down with political leaders on In the District and discuss local legislation, events, and issues. See how the community and business come together with The Bronx Now on BronxNet. Nosotros features leaders from a Latino community. Meet those who are moving to make a difference in public service, business, arts, and culture. Looking for new and exciting dining experiences? Then you'll want to savor the Bronx and try new restaurants and eateries that fill the borough with delicious dishes. We have it all, so experience the Bronx in new and fresh ways on BronxNet.
Morning, Gary. We are GetSchooled.com. You want a college education, don't you? Gary, financial aid forms. Biology homework, G. What? Picking a college, man. You and us go together like tacos and Tuesday.
And I love tacos.
We're back here on Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you. We are talking with 2 very special people, talking about the issue of reentry and prison reentry. Reentering back into the population after being incarcerated. It's a challenge that a lot of people face, and trying to bridge the gap to make it a more safe, not just safe, but a more, an open and an easy process for people who are trying to re-enter in. And our guest in the studio, Jen Lackard, and she's from the Race to Reentry. And then we've got Wesley Caines, who's the reentry coordinator for the Bronx Defenders. And as we said, thank you again for coming and sharing with us. Wes, I want to get to you for a quick second. Jump back to me about the bail reform. We talked a little bit about that. I know that's near and dear to your heart as well.
Definitely. So bail is one of those issues that directly impacts outcomes in a criminal matter. But I would like to say that the issue of bail is just one issue in our criminal justice system that has various integrated issues that all play off of each other. Mm-hmm. And when we speak about, first of all, I'm very happy that we're having a public discourse around criminal justice reform, bail reform, discovery reform, speedy trial reform. All of those things are very important, but we shouldn't be lulled into thinking that if we fix any of those single areas or even those 3 areas, that we have fixed issues that's really problematic with our justice system. I think on the front end of that problematic system is our policies related to how we treat and deal with certain communities and social issues. We have criminalized public health issues, we have criminalized mental health, We have criminalized poverty, and the impact of that has been a bloated justice system, which is really incapable of giving any individualized justice. So everyone gets swept up in this process. So I think that in the talk about bail and bail reform, which is very important, we should also not lose sight of the bigger picture, that our entire system of justice is really broken. And it's breaking people in turn. And that's something we need to address. And civic engagement, I think, gives us an opportunity for that. It allows the people who are most directly impacted to have their voices amplified, so that people, the policymakers specifically, will understand that when you sit in a chamber and you pass a law, it's not some random disconnected thing from people, right? Policy impacts people.
And so, Jen, let's talk about law enforcement for a second, because law enforcement, the community, there's that level of engagement that before we even get to being incarcerated, there's some things that can be prevented, you know, or there's also some communication, some dialogue that needs to be had on both sides. And so walk us through a little bit about, you know, what's happening here in the area of engagement between law enforcement and the community.
I think NYPD gets it. For it to be an organization of 40,000 individuals, which is fairly large, and the complexities that come with it. Of course, I have my challenges as to how things are done, but last week, a few stakeholders were invited to what's called the NYPD. It's a fair and implicit bias training, which they're acknowledging that on the basis of that we all walk around with some implicit bias when we're seeing people, or we make judgments and we don't realize it. And helping law enforcement to identify that is sort of the direction that they're going for 2019 and 2020. Apparently they're going to be training their entire enforcement, 40,000 officers on that. So I'm pretty excited to see that that's happening. I do think in that training, as I shared with them, one of the problems that they have is that it's about language and tone. Right? So many people who interact with law enforcement, sometimes they know they're doing something wrong, sometimes they don't. But how you treat people is really where I think there's a shift. And I openly said it in a room with command and said, it's the language and the tone. You can clearly say, ask a question. I don't know if that's different in communities of color and communities of color, but I do know that the way an officer talks to someone determines the response that they get. And when you have individuals who are not civically minded and they don't know how to respond and they don't know what their rights are and they're not sure how to talk or engage with law enforcement, that's where you see the challenges. And that's where we see people getting arrested and going through the system unnecessarily. We had a situation where someone participated in a program, they did something they thought they were supposed to do, they were arrested for doing something. I had just had a story of someone who they called law enforcement, they ended up getting arrested, right? And so part of it is they're not aware of what the rights are and what NYPD is challenged and tasked to do, and then what their rights are within that. And so when we do that, we noticed yesterday when we did our training, there was a lot we asked them, well, who's this elected official? Who's that? They had no idea who they were. But when we showed them James O'Neill, they knew who he was. They knew he was the police commissioner, right? They knew Ruben Diaz Jr. was the borough president. So sometimes it's making the connections to what they know and then tying it back to issues that really affect them on a daily basis.
I mean, cultural competency is the key here. I mean, I think there's a lot of, and the conversation's also been had too about, listen, if you're coming to a neighborhood, you should be a part or connected to the neighborhood. You understand a little bit better the people within the neighborhood. So when you talk about language and tone, if I know the community in which I'm dealing with and I speak to it, then there's this, there's this camaraderie, if you will, for lack of a better word, in the sense that we have a connection. I'll use a better word, connection. And that could prevent things from going awry and then leading possibly to incarceration. Do you feel that they get the area of cultural competency? Because this is major for what you have to deal with in your day-to-day work.
Yeah, I mean, cultural competency is across the board. I mean, like, we're working with the First Lady on the Thrive NYC initiative to work with mental health and substance abuse for individuals that are impacted by incarceration as well. Cultural competency is an issue amongst mental health, LGBTQ, law enforcement. You can apply that to almost every civic sector and how individuals work with those subpopulations. I think on the surface, people get it. how they do it and how it's implemented is where that's the tricky part, right? And so if you get someone who's not from the community, doesn't understand the dynamics, training someone on what to do, then you're going to see that disconnect because, you know, that's just not happening. We have a lot of individuals with law enforcement that are not from the community that they're serving, and the neighborhood coordination officers with NYPD helps that because it helps bridge that gap. Yesterday when I asked how many people know about the NC program, the NCO program, not many people answered. They don't know. And what I gave them was a civic exercise. Well, go to it. First off, you need to know the police precinct that you're in. Many of them did not know that. So this is the exercise. Go to nypd.org, put your, find my precinct, put your address in. When you put your address, it'll tell you your actual precinct in addition to your sector, and the email address to a sector officer if the NCO program has been initiated in that district. You have a way to get directly in contact with the person who's responsible for crime and control in your area. That's a way to get civically engaged. You have a problem, they have people loitering outside your street. Guess what? You can send an email and say, this is who I am, I live here, this is what's going on. That's what they're supposed to do. Part of it is we can't get upset with other agencies when they have these programs available and then community does not know that they exist. Right. So sort of what Wesley and I are doing is trying to bridge that gap in schools and in civic organizations so that because civics doesn't exist, they don't have those as classes, so they don't understand the political landscape and how to engage civically. But that's one piece. The Race for Re-Entry is really a collaborative where you can bring everyone together, children, youth, families, faith organizations, nonprofits, corporations, government, all together for a cause, and then just kind of having that dialogue. Where the conversation goes is pretty endless.
Take a quick break, come back. Wesley will get in on the conversation, talk about building community. How do we build a more inclusive community, particularly with those who've been incarcerated? Be right back in a few.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
Back here on Perspectives, continuing our final conversation with Jen, and Wesley. I want to ask you, before we close out, talk to us. I talked about inclusive community. Building a more inclusive community. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think for me, I envision an inclusive community as one where everyone has an opportunity to participate and engage. That may mean employment, that's housing certainly, but also that no one feel as if they stand outside of, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that involves how we value people, all people, understanding that we all come to the table with a little bit different perspective. But if we respect each other as human beings, then we understand that at some level we need to understand a bit more about each other in order for us to be more cohesive. Mm-hmm. An inclusive community is one that respects dignity, human dignity. It's one where, speaking to language and engagement by government, it's not only the police, it's some of the other governmental agencies that communities are forced to come in contact with, where they're not valued as human beings and their voice is not really listened to. I think all of that is about community. All of that, how people feel matters, right? Because we usually behave based on our feelings. And making sure that as government is held to a higher standard than average citizens. It should be more enlightened.
And let me get here about Jen, and talk about healthy, because healthy is the word of the day too.
It is.
Healthy community.
You know, let's not forget how this started. The race started because we were really the intersection of, we took something that I knew very well, which was re-entry, and the fact that I sat on the community board in the unhealthiest county in New York State, and I thought that was just appalling. And the Not 62 campaign for a healthy Bronx, and what we can do to raise those indicators was really a thrust for me. So that's when I merged those two worlds together, that's how the 5K came about. I reached out to the Bronx YMCA last year with this idea of, many of the people we're going to are not healthy. How can we get them active and running? Because when I say a 5K, they go, oh gosh, I don't work out, you know, and so we need sort of something before that. So we need to get in shape for the race, and they were all about it because they're all about community. That's the one thing I love about the YMCA, is that that really is their stronghold. And so they offered free memberships to people that were getting in shape for the race. We had some great outcomes where people took their free membership, worked with the Y on their budget, and converted their free membership to paid membership after the race, and they're still members today.
Awesome.
So that's like really something that we're excited about. And so this year we're doing it again, and that starts March 19th, so that's already up and running, March 19th to April 19th, right before the race. So if anyone is interested, they can check us out. Fit Camp is the name of it. Go to race.4reentry.com, race4reentry.com, and Fit Camp is all there. People can register and come join us.
Have a good time. So listen, we put the information at the bottom of the screen. You've seen it throughout the course of the show. You can be a part of the Race for Re-Entry and find out more about that. And also, the Bronx Defenders want to thank you both for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you for having us.
Very, very healthy conversation, very much needed conversation. And we'll continue this conversation here on Perspective. Stay with us because throughout the course, you'll be seeing some upcoming shows where we'll be talking about just this particular topic. It's, you know, in depth. Re-entry. How can we better serve those who've been incarcerated? What are the things that the community needs to know? And what are the things that those who are incarcerated need to know when they're coming out? That's all part of the conversation that we'll be having. Stay with us here on Perspectives. And of course, we'll continue to bring you more shows just like the one that you just seen today. For all of us here on the set, we thank you for watching. Until next time we meet, stay safe, share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in somebody else's life. Take care. God bless.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective, which shines a light.
Open up your books to page 360.
Did you just look at your phone while you was in class? You played yourself.
Talking about inspirational quotes.
You gotta believe in yourself. Don't ever play yourself. The key is to make it, so make it.
Louise, can you give me an example of an inspirational quote?
Don't play yourself. The key is to make it.
And who said that?
I did. Now that's a major key alert.
Learn the real major keys to getting to college at getschool.com.